Good morning, and welcome to another episode of Coffee and Tea with AARP, a bi-weekly conversation in which AARP staff and volunteers talk to Connecticut decision makers about policies and programs that are of interest to older residents. My name is Anna Doroghazi, and I'm the Associate State Director for Advocacy and Outreach at AARP Connecticut. I'm very pleased to be joined today by one of our great AARP Connecticut volunteers from West Haven, Meari Avery. In addition to being an AARP volunteer, Meari is also a nurse and has experience as a family caregiver. Thank you so much for being with us today, Meari.
Oh, thanks for inviting me. I'm very, very motivated and invested in, caring for and helping people who have dementia. It's a challenge.
Great. Well, thank you so much. It's also my pleasure to introduce our special guest for today, Carolyn DeRocco. Carolyn is Vice President of Programs and Education at the Alzheimer's Association Connecticut chapter. She has a Bachelor of Arts degree in Human Relations from St. Joseph College in Long Island with certificates in both counseling and human resources. She's been employed at the Alzheimer's Association Connecticut chapter for more than 15 years. Carolyn has over 20 years of experience as a therapeutic recreation director working with individuals with dementia in a skilled nursing facility, and over 25 years experience as a support group leader working with individuals diagnosed with dementia and their caregivers. She's a member of the Western Connecticut Area Agency on Aging Advisory Council and a former board member of the Connecticut Geriatric Society. Carolyn, welcome. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Carolyn, to get us started with today's conversation, because this is Caregiver Appreciation Month, could you tell us a little bit about the Alzheimer's Association, the kind of work that you do, and what your role is there?
Sure. The Alzheimer's Association is the leading voluntary health organization in Alzheimer's care, support, and research. And our mission at the association is to end Alzheimer's and all other dementias. And we're hoping to do this by accelerating global research, driving risk reduction and early detection, as well as maximizing quality care and support. So we have a lot of work to do in Connecticut, and we're really working hard. I'd love to share some of the programs that we are doing. We have educational programs for caregivers and the community that are free of charge. Right now, we're doing a lot of things virtually. We also have online programs, but these programs exist on a variety of topics, from the 10 warning signs to effective communication strategies to understanding and responding to dementia-related behaviors. We have series for even those living with the disease and really how to help them live well. Lots of educational programs. The other thing really is support for the caregiver, as well as support for the person living with the disease. So we have several support groups, many support groups throughout Connecticut that are facilitated by our wonderful volunteers that go through our training. We have caregiver support groups and actually, again, support groups for those living with the disease. But also we have early stage social engagement programs. And these are more of social events for those people in the early stage of disease. And what I mean by that, this is in the early stage where they're still able to participate in conversation and want to be around others who are living that same experience. We've diverted many of those right now to virtual, such as the Manitouk Museum programs, the Aldrich Museum programs, where they're coming together in a safe environment to just be with others who are experiencing that forgetfulness and some of those problems with cognitive disabilities, and they could be supported with each other. Some other things that we are doing is we have a respite grant. So we know that caregivers need a break, and we have some funding for a respite grant program where it allows caregivers to get help, whether it be help in the home with a companion, or maybe the caregiver might need some assistance. Maybe they're having cataract surgery or something else where they need to go into the hospital and get care. It can help fund somebody staying in a skilled nursing or assisted living for a short amount of time. So we do have that service available as well. One of the other things, again, we're really busy in Connecticut, is that we have advocacy efforts. So we actually have advocates who help in research and care initiatives, both on the state and federal level. And then we also, we want to fund programs, and we want to have a cure for this disease. So we have our 7 walks throughout Connecticut that are our biggest fundraising events, and also our longest day events. So pretty busy in Connecticut, really trying to, the 2 words I'm going to probably use many times today is education and support, and know that you're not alone, and we're here for you.
Wonderful. So you are very, very busy.
A little busy.
And I know, I've met some of your wonderful volunteers and other staff members, and all just really great folks doing tremendous work, here in Connecticut and nationwide. It's really, really exciting work. So could you tell us a little bit more about, what is Alzheimer's disease? And I hear too, sometimes people intermingle the terms, Alzheimer's disease and dementia. Is there a difference? Can you talk us through that a little bit?
Sure, absolutely. And I get this question in every training that I do. So we want to think about this. Dementia is a group of symptoms. So think of dementia as an umbrella term. And what are those symptoms? Those symptoms are memory loss, confusion, problems with thinking, reasoning, and some changes in behavior. So that is the umbrella term. Alzheimer's disease is the most common cause of dementia. So even though it's used interchangeably, it's very different. We want to think of, somebody gave me a wonderful example many years ago. You may have a fever. So you have symptoms of a fever. You might be hot, you might be flushed, but there's different causes for you to have that fever. So that's a kind of an easy way to think about this. So again, dementia is the umbrella term. Alzheimer's disease is the most common cause of dementia symptoms. We know that Alzheimer's disease is a progressive disease, unfortunately. It is progressive, and it is fatal. There's actually cell death, brain cell death that happens because of Alzheimer's disease. We know there's biomarkers, plaques and tangles that we believe are causing that cell death.
Well, so if we think about Alzheimer's, and what are some of the earliest signs, and how do you differentiate between Alzheimer's and, say, forgetfulness? Because I know that everybody's really worried. They don't want to get Alzheimer's. They're thinking, oh, I forgot something. Is that Alzheimer's?
Right. So we talk about the difference between Alzheimer's and normal aging. So we do know that as we age, right, we do become a little bit more forgetful. It may take us longer to learn new things, right? So that's normal aging. What's very different, so some examples, we all may lose things or misplace things, right? But we, without Alzheimer's disease or related dementia, we have the ability to retrace our steps. So I may, can't find my phone, but I can remember, I ran into the house, the dog was barking, I put it on the table, and I could retrace my steps to find that missing item. Somebody with dementia, the ability to retrace their steps is very difficult to do. Also, some of the things is when we think about some of the early signs, it's memory changes. And the word here is changes. So if you were never good at birthdays or names, this was maybe not a change, but somebody who would always remembered everyone's birthday, they sent the cards in the mail, and all of a sudden now they're forgetting that. That's a change in their memory. Somebody that may be very good with directions all the time, and now all of a sudden is not remembering how to get places. That's a change in their memory. Often what's very confusing sometimes too is that the difference between short-term memory and long-term memory. With Alzheimer's disease specifically, we see short-term memory being affected. Can be very confusing for caregivers because they're saying, my mom's memory is fine. She's talking about her wedding 50 years ago and her jobs that she's had many years ago, but doesn't remember the time of her doctor's appointment, or maybe repeating a story over and over again, right? So those are some other signs. Another significant sign is having difficulty with tasks. And the key word here is familiar tasks. I'll share an example. I love to share examples of some of the support groups and the family members I've worked with in support groups. She shared that her husband worked in a corporation for many years, always wore a suit and tie. And this one morning he woke up and he said, honey, I can't tie my tie. So this was a very familiar task that he was always able to do, but now couldn't. So that's very different than you get a brand new cell phone or some new remote control and you can't figure out how to use that. We're talking about something that the person was very familiar with and knew how to use and are having struggles with that. Those are some other signs. Again, we have a whole program on the 10 warning signs that goes through each of the 10 signs in much more detail, but those are just some of the significant ones I'd like to share. Sometimes we see somebody withdrawing from social activities, or maybe they're not taking that promotion at work, right? This may be a flag, something may be going on.
Can I just ask, so the programs you mentioned, are they online?
Absolutely.
Most of them? That way, if somebody can't leave the house, they could actually participate in are they recorded?
On our website, we have all of our educational programs are free. And what's really nice, they have videos. So you're actually listening to caregivers speak and share their story.
Right.
Many of them have people living with the disease to share their experience. And you can go on anytime to 2 a.m. and plug in and watch that video.
Wonderful. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So you were mentioning some of the early signs and symptoms. For folks who might have a loved one who's experiencing that, or maybe this sounds familiar for themselves, how does a person receive a specific diagnosis of Alzheimer's? And then, once they have a diagnosis, what are things that people need to know in terms of planning ahead and setting themselves up, to be as comfortable as possible and to receive whatever care they might need?
Sure, like what's next? Yeah. So sometimes some people are very comfortable sharing some of their memory concerns with their primary care physician. And some primary care physicians are more educated and learned about Alzheimer's disease and kind of help with that process. Many will refer out for more testing, and they may send you to a geriatrician or a neurologist, neuropsychologist, psychiatrist. We also have diagnostic centers throughout our state. And on our community resource finder, we do have a list of those as well. So this is not a disease that there's just one test. It's a group of tests, right? So first they'll have a physical exam to rule out something that could be reversible, right? Maybe somebody is showing these dementia symptoms, like I shared, but maybe they're having a B12 deficiency or a vitamin deficiency. Maybe there's some problems with medication. So they're having dementia-like symptoms, but it's not Alzheimer's disease. There's something medical there they can look at some blood work and really do a physical exam. They'll also then do mini mental exams, some cognitive testing, also probably some brain scans. So sometimes MRIs or CAT scans. Usually PET scans are done more in research studies, but there'll be a whole list and whole routine there. It won't be just one type of test. So again, if somebody does receive a diagnosis, I think one of the first things to know is, and I'm so glad you have me on today, is just to know that you're not alone. So often I hear that people got a diagnosis and they did not know where to turn. Something that I absolutely believe is that even though there's no cure right now, there's actually things we can do through education and support to better the lives of the person living with the disease as well as the caregiver. So for the person living with, again, know that there's programs for you to be with others that are experiencing the same losses. And what's beautiful about that is they share strategies with one another, really focusing on how to live well. We actually have a whole program on how to live well with Alzheimer's. I can share, one of my members in my group shared, she said, Carolyn, I was diagnosed a year ago, but I'm not dying tomorrow. And this is 8 years ago now. She has been teaching about the disease. So how do I learn to live well? We know this disease can be from 2 to 20 years. So let's talk about living well. And I'll talk more about that later with stigma, but let's talk about living well with this disease. So that's one thing that I think is really important. Also, people who are diagnosed, many of them may want to go into clinical trials to really make a difference. I share with families that even if a trial fails, the researcher still learns from that trial, and you're really still making a difference in science and research. So sometimes being able to be in a clinical trial if you're diagnosed. For the caregiver, again, know that we are here to support you. There are support groups for you. Educate yourself about the disease if there's a diagnosis. Ask for help. It is okay to ask for help with this disease. Know that it's progressive. And I talk to families about, once you get a diagnosis, think of who is your care team. Maybe it's neighbors, maybe it's family members, your doctors, social workers. Who is that team that you would refer to and ask for help? The other thing I was going to also say is legal and financial planning. Really, really important to plan ahead. With Alzheimer's disease, we want to make sure that we're not making decisions when they become a crisis. We want to be able to plan ahead. So involving the person diagnosed, if it's early enough that they can participate in some of that planning and some of those decisions that you want to make together, is beneficial. Sometimes it's doing those things that maybe you were going to do 10 years from now. I have a couple in my couples group where they always wanted to buy a cottage in Nantucket, and they decided, let's not wait to retirement. And they go every weekend now, and they're enjoying those moments now. So really looking at the future, planning ahead, thinking of what care you may need, interviewing home care agencies and visiting skilled nursing and assisted livings now. You may never need them, but if you do need them, who's on your list? Kind of doing that planning. And again, I can't stress enough is not being afraid to talk about this and not being afraid to ask for help.
Wow. Your organization really has so much information organized to help negotiate this map, which initially is mapless, right? As a former caregiver, when you have a loved one who, my mom had dementia, wasn't Alzheimer's type, but it was still dementia. And, you have the emotion. It doesn't matter that I professionally should have known what to do. I had the emotion. I was the daughter. So your organization and AARP, we both have the same sort of advocacy motivation to help caregivers. And you spoke a lot about some of the things that the resources for caregivers. What are some of the challenges that you have heard people face as they're caring for their loved ones?
Sure. So there's so many challenges. I think a big challenge is there's a stigma, and people often don't want to talk about it. And I think that's something that we want to get, really want to focus on. Somebody can still live well, and it's no one's fault, and this is a disease. So let's support each other. So I think the stigma is a challenge. Sometimes getting the diagnosis. Again, the person who has dementia may or may not have insight that they're seeing these changes. So people who are in my groups, they are aware they have the disease and want to be with others. But then some people lack insight. So sometimes a family member or caregiver, even getting them to the doctor to get a diagnosis is challenging. And we can help. We have lots of topic sheets and discussions on that. We have a program called Dementia Conversations, about how to have those difficult conversations, even about driving, about going to the doctor. Sometimes with younger onset. So when I speak about younger onset, these are people who are under the age of 65 who are diagnosed. Sometimes there's a chance of misdiagnosed because they're so young, and it may be misdiagnosed as depression or something else. Again, I also think, this disease is affecting not only memory, it's affecting cognition, thinking, reasoning, behavior, and communication. Communication is affected. So is the person able to communicate, that they're losing some abilities? Sometimes language, being able to read, and all those things are affected. So it makes it really challenging for the caregiver. The caregiver really is experiencing emotional, physical, and financial. It's taxing in all those areas. Again, so know that there's support. I also think another challenge is sometimes the caregiver is doing so much for the person diagnosed, and the person diagnosed is not even realizing this, all that they're doing. Again, sometimes that's the benefit of a support group, to be with others, to say, I'm going through this. I'm helping my mom every day. I'm bringing dinner, and she's yelling at me that I haven't seen her. So there's so many challenges with this disease. Also, I've heard some family members talk about this is a long goodbye. There's so many losses through this, 2 to 20 years. Maybe the loss of recognition, possibly, the loss of language. So those losses can be difficult, and it could be a very long grieving period. I hope that we can learn through programs and support to focus on strengths rather than weaknesses. And I think that helps the caregiver. Something else that I really think is challenging is that the person often looks very, very healthy, right? I often wish this could be a little window we could see how is the brain doing, because the person may look fine. So sometimes not understanding what they're experiencing is hard for a caregiver. I can share an experience. I was at a conference with somebody who was, it was for those living with the disease. And I was speaking to this woman, and she was speaking really eloquently. And as we continued in our conversation, she said, no, I'm diagnosed. I was diagnosed 2 years ago. And I said, you're speaking so beautifully to me. She said, but I'm exhausted. This is exhausting for me to be able to speak clearly and accurately with the right words. I'm exhausted. And I think sometimes caregivers may not understand that, because the communication can be difficult.
Wow, that's so interesting, and just a really that story. I mean, I think Meari and I are both like, oh wow, yeah, that's such an important thing to keep in mind. And that story, and a lot of what you've been saying about how Alzheimer's can impact our speech and our cognition. All of these impact our relationships and our ability to maintain the relationship that we had with a person. And we're recording this conversation in the middle of the holiday season. We're right in between, Thanksgiving and the December holidays. So I'm wondering, could you speak a little bit to folks who might be on the verge of spending some time with loved ones? What are some things that they might be thinking about? Maybe there's a new Alzheimer's diagnosis in the family and they're not sure, how should I approach getting together with family this year?
Right. And holiday times are an opportunity to be together and laugh and have memories. At the same time, they are stressful, right? And now you have Alzheimer's disease or another related dementia where the caregiver is caring for somebody. So I think, again, one thing is not to be afraid to talk about it. Give your family members, your friends a call. Let them know what's happening. Again, we haven't seen each other. Some of us who with this whole quarantine, right? We haven't seen each other. Let them know where your person is at in the stage of the disease and through this journey. Catch them up. I think also not to be afraid to say, you know what, I'm going to need some help. Even though you maybe you did everything as a caregiver, maybe have a potluck dinner, ask everyone to bring a dish. Again, you may want to think about the holidays and really adjust your expectation. And what I mean by that is we know that people with dementia may tire easily, especially later on in the day. So rather than have a dinner, maybe have a brunch, right? Or maybe an early breakfast. The other thing is, overstimulation can be difficult for someone with dementia. So if you usually have, 15 people, maybe have 5 and maybe make it a smaller group. It's also very important to include the person living with dementia to be part of the festivities. We know that multitasking is difficult for someone with dementia. So, to say to someone, can you set the table? That may be very overwhelming for someone. But if you hand them the napkins and say, can you put the napkins out? They can still participate. So again, we have to learn through our education about the disease and what the person's experiencing to change some of the ways we give direction. And we want to break down tasks, verbal tasks, but also, physical tasks, break them down step by step so the person can still participate. We know that people with dementia still want to have a say and have a sense of purpose and feel like they're helping. So include them in the discussions, include them in the activity and the festivities and setting up. Another suggestion that some family members have done is have a quiet room, where the person with dementia may be able to just go to get away from the stimulation and the noise, which is wonderful and fun, right? But sometimes they may need some quiet time. I also suggest, I was a rec therapist, so I suggest making an activity box with maybe 5 favorite things, maybe a favorite movie, crossword puzzle, deck of cards, favorite snack, that this person will have in their room and any of the family members can sit and enjoy, maybe looking at photographs together. So they have an activity to do. That will help the caregiver as they're getting ready in the kitchen and doing the cooking. Another suggestion is if the person with dementia is at the stage where they're forgetting people's names, that could be very uncomfortable and can cause some anxiety. If they imagine not knowing who somebody is or not being able to call them by their name. So a very creative idea is to have the grandchildren or maybe the nieces or nephews make decorative name tags for the holiday and everyone wears one. So this way the person with dementia automatically knows, okay, you're Susie, you're Mike, and does not feel like I'm trying to figure out who is this person. So again, I think not being afraid to talk about it, letting the family know the situation, and then asking for help, I think are so important. Make new traditions, maybe watch a movie together, music, a sing-along. These are all very helpful. I don't want to dismiss also the importance of safety. So again, depending on where your loved one is in the journey, make sure no candles, right? You may want to just put the fake flicker candles. Be careful of fruits and vegetables that are, imitation, that may look very real. Blinking lights can be distracting and overwhelming. I could share a story with someone who was an electrician, and the blinking lights, he thought there was a short and was very, very anxious, but couldn't communicate that. So again, some of these things, again, we can help you with. We have lists of holiday gift ideas and different ways to keep the home safe during the holidays. But really important to do things together, still enjoy moments. We just might need to make some adjustments and change some of our expectations.
What great advice and great suggestions. We've been talking a lot about caregivers and loved ones, but how about the people who actually are living with the disease, they themselves? What are some common misconceptions about people who have Alzheimer's? And why do you think there is so much stigma about people with dementia or Alzheimer's?
Sure, happy to share. And I feel very blessed. Several years ago, we first started our early stage groups. And I remember, being very nervous. being in a group of people who are newly diagnosed. And I was so pleasantly surprised that they were full of hope and encouragement and really wanted to live in the moment. So I think sometimes there's a misconception that once there's a diagnosis, the person can no longer do things, right? And I think we really want to help them continue to focus on their strengths rather than their weaknesses. I think that's really, really important. Sometimes there's misconceptions that the person is just being lazy. Maybe they've been sitting on the couch all afternoon. Well, we have to remember that this disease is not just a disease that affects memory, right? I spoke about it affects our cognition, our thinking, our reasoning, even our ability to initiate an activity. So it may not be that they don't want to participate, but they might need us to help them get up and go and give them some direction. I could share a beautiful story many years ago in a support group. A wife said to me, I'm so upset because my husband used to always hold my hand when we walked across the street. And he always held my hand and kind of cuddled me on the couch when we watched a movie. And she said, he doesn't do that anymore. And I'm not understanding. And I said, do me a favor. Can you reach out for his hand first? And she came back the next month and she said to me, Carol, she said, he held on to my hand so tightly. So she just had to initiate that. He, our brain controls all that we are and all that we do. So he needed help initiating activities. So again, not thinking of them as lazy, but they may need some cueing. I think that's really important for us to know. Some of the misconceptions is that they're doing this on purpose, right? Somebody with dementia, they have good days and bad days. Some days they're a little more clearer than others. So to know that every behavior is a form of communication. As caregivers, I always, when I teach a class, I give our caregivers little magnifying glasses. I said, you're now the detectives. Because you have to kind of figure out what are they trying to communicate to you. They are doing the very best that they can with this brain disease. And so I think sometimes, to really sit back and know, like, this is not on purpose, this is part of the disease. And I think educating families that it affects communication, it affects my ability to plan, to know what to do next, even to know what's behind a door. I remember a family member shared with me that his wife wouldn't go into the kitchen for dinner. He couldn't get her to go beyond that door. And he put a picture of the kitchen on the wall and he would point to it and she would go right in. He said, I had no idea that she did not know what was beyond. That was something that she had lost in her memory. So again, trying to understand what the person is going through so that we can, as caregivers, help them thrive and have the best quality life. And that's going to help the caregiver as well.
You reminded me as you're talking about that, somebody once said, people aren't doing it to you. They're just doing it. That's the illness. And I think that we have the whole history with our loved ones, the good, the bad, and the ugly, or whatever. So we really do need the support of Alzheimer's Association support groups so that there's someone else to bounce it off versus just trying to figure it out yourself with your own emotions.
Right.
It's much better to have some objectivity to assist with that.
Yeah.
And I think it makes it easier.
Yeah. And it's personal, you're losing a loved one's role, right? You talked, Anna, about how this role changes, and this person may have done the bills and done the cleaning, and all of a sudden now as a caregiver, you're taking on all those responsibilities. So there's changes in roles that could be very hard as well. But again, I think, trying to focus on strengths rather than weaknesses, and keeping ways to stay connected. There's a caregiver that said, every night before we go to bed, my husband and I would put the music on and we dance across the living room. He remembers how to dance and he remembers the song and can sing along. So trying to find those ways to, for the caregiver as well as the person living with, to stay connected, to know that they're still there. They're still there. It's really important.
Yeah, so to switch gears just a little bit here, the Alzheimer's Association is the largest nonprofit funder of Alzheimer's research. And it sounds like, I feel like I keep seeing news stories about, new treatments and promising preventions. Can you tell us a little more about some of this research and any, interesting or promising work that's going on?
Sure. And so we are an exciting time with research, and proud to be part of this very important research all over the world. I said it's global. We have an Alzheimer's International Conference that brings thousands of researchers together. So this year, the FDA approved the first disease-modifying treatment. It's the first time we can say there's actually a treatment. It's still, offers families more time with one another. And it's one of many that will be in the pipeline. So that's very exciting. We're also looking at studies that look at lifestyle interventions as prevention. Many years ago when I worked at the association, we didn't even talk about the word prevention. And now we're looking at lifestyles. So we're looking at, in particular, there's a study called the US Pointer Study, and that's looking at a combination of exercise, eating right, keeping social, keeping cognitive, stimulated, and also wellness visits, and looking at that combination. Can that reduce risk? So we're actually studying that, which is really exciting. Right here in Connecticut, I'm so proud the association has funded $2.2 million in research funding right here in Connecticut alone. Scientists really are working very hard. We're looking at depression and dementia, and also different types of dementia and different forms of dementia as well. And what's really exciting is we are looking at a blood test as a diagnostic tool that will be down the road. So that's something that's actively being researched right now.
Wow, a lot of exciting things happening.
Yeah.
So we have talked about so much. Is there anything we haven't asked you about that you want people to know about the Alzheimer's Association, or about Alzheimer's, or about other dementias? And when you say other dementias, what are you talking about?
Yeah, so there's about 60 or more types of dementia. Again, Alzheimer's disease being the most common, followed probably by vascular dementia, which is most, caused by strokes, a lack of oxygen to the brain. Dementia with Lewy bodies, a Lewy body protein that's killing the neurons in the brain, frontal temporal dementias. So again, there's different causes of cell death in the brain that are causing those dementia symptoms. So even though we are the Alzheimer's Association, the long word is Alzheimer's Association and related disorders. So we are here to help with all types of dementia and look at behaviors and communication strategies for all types of dementia. Thank you so much for letting me cover so much. I teach 8-hour classes, so I'm like, okay, we have to get a lot in here. But I think my message is know that we are here for you. You're not alone. We are a volunteer organization. So if any of you want to become community educators, be facilitators of support groups, join our walks. When I had a support group, I never forget the family being so excited that all these thousands of people were there for them. People with dementia need to do something. Caregivers need to know they're making a difference. So you can join our walk teams. We would love to have you. Our 800 number is 1-800-272-3900. You can call us 24/7, 365 days a year on any question, whether you're concerned about your own memory, you're having difficulty, maybe keeping the home safe or communicating with your loved one. Professionals can call us. Many times people think that our helpline is only for professionals. Also, something that you may not know is with our helpline, we can also schedule like hour care consultations. So it's not just for a quick, where's the nearest support group, but if you really want to schedule time to talk to one of our dementia specialists, we're happy to do that for you as well.
That's great. And Carolyn, thank you so much. I feel like this was there was so much information in this conversation, but I still have so many more questions. And, I love that you're such a wealth of, information and resources, but also just your compassion is so clear as well. So thank you for that and for your work. So just, really quick before we wrap up, could you say that phone number maybe one more time? And then is there a website where folks can connect and get more information?
Yep, www.alz.org and then /CT. There's all of programs on research, a list on our community resource finder of educational programs, support groups. If you have trouble navigating, because there's a lot on there, know that you can call our helpline and say, can you help me find such and such, or I want information on research. Our helpline is 1-800-272-3900. And you can be caring for somebody, you can be diagnosed with the disease, you can be a professional, or somebody that just wants to learn about the disease. You're welcome to call us. I cannot thank you enough. One of the things we know is together we're stronger. You're working with caregivers all the time. So, to just share resources and information. The one gap I hope closes is that when people are diagnosed, they know that there's something available for them. And I think together we can make more people have access to that care.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Meari. Thanks also to you for bringing your own experience to this conversation as well. So thank you both. And thanks to everybody who tuned in for today's episode of Coffee and Tea with AARP. We hope to see you again in the new year for more great conversations and helpful resources. So thank you so much again to both of you, and have a great day.